The phone buzzed against the kitchen counter like a dying wasp, and that's when my life went to hell. I wasn't supposed to see it. Daphne had left her iPhone face down next to the coffee maker while she showered upstairs, steam probably fogging up the bathroom mirror she spent 20 minutes staring into every morning. The notification light blinked blue through the black case, insistent as a heartbeat. Don't look, Colton. Don't be that husband. But I looked anyway. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The text preview showed enough to make me freeze. Can't wait to see you tonight. Our secret place, 8 p.m. Don't stress about C, he won't find out. The sender? Trevor Holt. Trevor Holt. Daphne's ex-boyfriend from college, the guy who sold used cars with the enthusiasm of a tent revival preacher, and the morals of a loan shark. The same Trevor who'd been sniffing around our marriage like a dog in heat ever since he moved back to town 6 months ago. I set the phone down exactly where I found it, my hands steadier than they had any right to be. Upstairs, the shower was still running. Daphne would emerge in 10 minutes, hair wrapped in that ridiculous turban towel, skin flushed pink, looking like the woman I'd married 12 years ago instead of the stranger who'd been sharing my bed. Don't stress about C. Like I was some obstacle to navigate around, some speed bump on the road to whatever the hell they were planning. I poured myself coffee from the pot Daphne had made, the same ritual we'd shared for over a decade. The kitchen looked exactly the same as it had 5 minutes ago. Yellow walls, family photos on the refrigerator, our son Jake's soccer schedule held up by magnets shaped like tiny boxing gloves. But everything had shifted, like someone had tilted the whole house just enough to make the furniture slide. The water shut off upstairs. I had maybe 8 minutes before she came down, humming whatever pop song was stuck in her head, asking if I remembered to pick up Jake from practice at 6. 8 minutes to decide what kind of man I was going to be. I could confront her right now, wave the phone in her face, demand explanations. That's what the old Colton would have done, the guy who used to settle disputes with his fists in the amateur boxing ring behind Murphy's gym. But I wasn't 25 anymore, and I'd learned a thing or two about strategy in the logistics business. Sometimes, you had to let your opponent think they were winning before you showed them how wrong they were. Instead, I opened my own phone and pulled up our shared family location app. Daphne's little blue dot showed she was home, right here in our kitchen. But tonight at 8 o'clock, I'd know exactly where she really was. The floorboards creaked overhead. Daphne moving around the bedroom, probably standing in front of the walk-in closet in her bathrobe, deciding what to wear for her big date. Would she pick the black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary? The one that hugged her curves in all the right places and made me feel like the luckiest bastard in Ohio? My coffee tasted like ash, but I kept drinking it. Normal morning routine. Nothing to see here. "Morning, honey," Daphne called from the top of the stairs, her voice bright and cheerful. The same voice that had whispered, "I love you," in my ear last night, before rolling over and going to sleep. "Morning," I called back, surprised at how normal I sounded. "Coffee's fresh." She appeared in the doorway wearing her blue scrubs. She managed the front office at Midwest Pharmaceutical, all efficiency and clipboard authority. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she looked tired. Guilty tired, or just regular tired? Hard to tell the difference anymore. "You're up early," she said, kissing my cheek on her way to the coffee pot. Her lips felt like paper against my skin. "Couldn't sleep. Big shipment coming in today." The lie rolled off my tongue, smooth as butter. "What's your day look like?" She poured coffee into her travel mug, the one Jake had made her in art class with "World's Best Mom" painted in crooked letters. The usual chaos. Dr. Peterson's being impossible about the new inventory system, and don't get me started on the drama with the insurance approvals. Sounds rough. I watched her face in the reflection of the microwave door. No tells, no nervous tics. She was good at this. What time will you be home? Not sure. Might grab dinner with Sarah after work. You know how she gets when Brad's traveling. Sarah. Right. Sarah Martinez, her best friend since high school, who'd been divorced for 3 years and supposedly needed Daphne's shoulder to cry on. Except Sarah was in Florida this week visiting her sister. I knew because she'd posted pictures of Miami Beach on Facebook yesterday. Another lie, smooth as silk. No problem, I said. I'll pick up Jake and order pizza. Daphne smiled, the same smile that used to make my heart skip beats. You're the best. I don't know what I'd do without you. The irony hit me like a punch to the gut. In a few hours, she'd find out exactly what she'd do without me. She grabbed her purse and keys, kissed me goodbye like she had 1,000 times before, and walked out the door to her silver Honda Accord. I watched through the kitchen window as she backed out of the driveway, probably already thinking about tonight, about Trevor, about whatever secret they'd been planning. The house felt different with her gone, bigger, quieter, like a stage after the actors had left but before the crew struck the set. I finished my coffee and went upstairs to get ready for work. In the bedroom, I could smell her perfume lingering in the air, the expensive stuff I'd given her for Christmas. The bed was made with military precision, pillows fluffed and arranged just so, everything perfect on the surface. In the bathroom, I caught my reflection in the mirror Daphne had been staring into 20 minutes ago. 40-year-old face, brown hair starting to show gray at the temples, brown eyes that had seen too much and understood too little. I looked like exactly what I was, a middle-class guy from the Rust Belt who coordinated shipping schedules and coached Little League on weekends. Nothing special, nothing worth fighting for, apparently. But looks could be deceiving. I'd learned that in the ring, where pretty boys with perfect hair got their lights knocked out by guys who looked like they fixed air conditioners for a living. It wasn't about how you looked. It was about how hard you could hit and how much punishment you could take. And I'd been taking punishment for months without even knowing it. Time to hit back. The thing about logistics is that everything leaves a trail. Shipments, deliveries, inventory. It all gets tracked, documented, cross-referenced. After 15 years in the business, I'd developed a nose for patterns, for things that didn't add up. My marriage, it turned out, had a lot of things that didn't add up. I started digging that afternoon during my lunch break, sitting in my truck outside the warehouse where I worked. The Crowbar was across the street, its neon beer signs flickering even in daylight, promising the kind of liquid comfort I'd probably need later. But first, I had detective work to do. The family phone plan was in my name, which meant I had access to all the usage records. I pulled up Daphne's call and text history on my laptop, scrolling through months of data like I was tracking a missing shipment. There it was, a pattern emerging from the digital noise. The text to Trevor had started 3 months ago, just a few at first, clustered around lunch hours and late evenings. Then more frequent, daily conversations that lasted for hours, usually when I was at work or after I'd gone to bed. The timing was surgical in its precision. Most of the actual messages were deleted from her phone, but the metadata told the story. Hundreds of texts, phone calls that lasted 30, 40 minutes, a relationship conducted in the shadows of my marriage. I cross-referenced the dates with my own calendar. The night I'd worked late on the Morrison account, 17 texts between Daphne and Trevor. The weekend I'd taken Jake camping, a 2-hour phone call on Saturday night while I was zipping my son into his sleeping bag. My hands were shaking by the time I closed the laptop. Not from anger yet, but from the sheer scope of the betrayal. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment mistake or a moment of weakness. This was planned, deliberate, sustained deception. The warehouse break room felt like a fishbowl when I walked back inside. My co-workers were clustered around the coffee machine, talking about the Browns' chances this season, their voices a distant buzz. Everything looked normal, but I felt like I was viewing it all through thick glass. "You okay, Colton?" asked Mike Brennan, the shift supervisor. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Just tired, I said. Long night. If only he knew. The afternoon dragged like a funeral march. I went through the motions of checking invoices and coordinating deliveries, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept thinking about Trevor Holt, trying to remember what I knew about him. He'd dated Daphne in college, before she and I met at that party junior year. She'd mentioned him a few times over the years, always casually, always in the context of someone I used to know. He'd moved to California after graduation, got married, started selling real estate or insurance or some other parasitic profession. Then his marriage fell apart, and he'd crawled back to Ohio like a wounded animal returning to familiar territory. He'd opened a used car lot on the south side of town, the kind of place that sold financing to people with bad credit and worse judgment. I'd driven past it a few times, Holt's Honest Autos, with a giant inflatable gorilla dancing on the roof. The irony of that name wasn't lost on me now. At 5 o'clock, I picked up Jake from soccer practice. He was 10 years old, all knees and elbows and boundless energy, chattering about his day as he threw his gear in the back of my truck. Coach says I might make starting midfielder next season if I keep working on my passing, he said, bouncing in the passenger seat. Can we practice in the backyard tonight? Sure, buddy, I said, though I knew I'd be distracted. How about after dinner? We stopped for pizza at Tony's, the same place we'd been going since Jake was old enough to sit in a high chair. The owner, Mrs. Castellano, pinched Jake's cheeks and asked about school while we waited for our order. Normal family routine. Father and son grabbing dinner while Mom worked late, except Mom wasn't working late. Mom was probably at home right now, getting ready for her secret rendezvous. Picking out clothes, applying makeup, transforming herself into the woman Trevor remembered from 20 years ago. Dad, you're doing that thing again. I looked at Jake, who was staring at me with concern in his brown eyes, Daphne's eyes. What thing? That thing where you look angry but you're trying not to look angry. Mom does it too sometimes. Smart kid. Too smart for his own good. Just thinking about work stuff, I said. Nothing for you to worry about. But he was already worrying. I could see it in the way he picked at his pizza, the way he kept glancing at me when he thought I wasn't looking. Kids were like emotional barometers. They sensed the pressure changes before the storm hit. We practiced soccer in the backyard until the sun started setting. Jake's passes were getting better, more accurate, and I found myself genuinely proud, despite the chaos in my head. Whatever happened between Daphne and me, Jake was the one good thing we'd created together, the one thing worth protecting. At 7:30, I sent him inside to shower and get ready for bed. Then I sat on the back porch with a beer and opened the location app on my phone. Daphne's blue dot was moving. She'd left the house 20 minutes ago and was currently heading south on Route 42, toward the old part of town where she and Trevor used to hang out in college. I watched the dot crawl across the digital map, each movement a small betrayal, each mile another nail in the coffin of our marriage. The dot stopped at Riverside Park, of course. The same park where we'd had our first real date, where I'd kissed her under the old oak tree by the river. The same bench where I'd proposed to her 6 years later, nervous as a teenager and twice as hopeful. Our secret place, Trevor had called it in his text, but it had been my secret place first. I finished my beer and went inside to tuck Jake into bed. He was already under the covers, reading a book about dragons and wizards, his hair still damp from the shower. "Night, Dad," he said, hugging me tight. "Night, buddy. Sweet dreams." Is Mom coming home tonight? The question hit me like a physical blow. Of course she is. She's just having dinner with Sarah. Another lie to add to the pile. But what was I supposed to tell him? That his mother was currently sitting in a park with another man, planning God knows what? That the life he thought was solid and permanent was actually built on quicksand? "Okay," he said, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. I turned off his light and closed the door, then walked to the master bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. The room still smelled like Daphne's perfume, still looked like the sanctuary we'd shared for over a decade. But it felt hollow now, like a movie set dressed to look like a home. My phone buzzed with a text message. Having a great time with Sarah. Don't wait up. Love you. I stared at the screen until the words blurred together. Love you. 2 words that had lost all meaning, reduced to punctuation marks at the end of a lie. I opened the location app one more time. Daphne's blue dot was still at the park, had been there for over an hour now. Long dinner conversation with an old friend or something else entirely? Time to find out. The drive to Riverside Park took 12 minutes, long enough for me to question my sanity twice and my marriage about 100 times. I parked 3 blocks away, in the lot behind Murphy's gym where I used to train, and walked the rest of the way through the shadows between streetlights. The park was mostly empty at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night. A few joggers on the main path, some teenagers smoking cigarettes by the playground, an old man walking his dog. Normal evening activities for normal people living normal lives. I wasn't normal people anymore. I found them on the bench by the river, the same bench where I'd gotten down on one knee and promised to love Daphne forever. They weren't touching, weren't kissing, weren't doing anything that would look suspicious to a casual observer. Just 2 old friends catching up, sitting a respectable distance apart, talking in low voices while the water flowed past. But I could read the body language like a shipping manifest. The way Daphne leaned toward him when she talked. The way Trevor's hand rested on the back of the bench, not quite touching her shoulder but close enough to claim territory. The way they both kept looking around, checking for witnesses. I crouched behind a cluster of pine trees about 50 yards away, feeling like a private investigator in a bad movie. The smart play would have been to leave right then, to go home and confront Daphne with what I knew, to handle this like adults. But I'd never been accused of being particularly smart. I stayed for 45 minutes watching my wife fall in love with another man all over again. They talked and laughed and shared memories I wasn't part of, creating new secrets to hide from me. When Trevor finally walked Daphne to her car, he kissed her cheek, a gesture that could have been innocent if you didn't know better. But I knew better now. I waited until both cars had disappeared before walking back to my truck. The night air felt cold against my skin, and I realized I was sweating despite the temperature. My hands were steady, though. That was something. By the time I got home, Daphne's Honda was already in the driveway. The living room lights were on, and I could see her silhouette moving around inside, probably getting ready to tell me all about her wonderful evening with Sarah. I sat in my truck for a few minutes, gathering my thoughts and my courage. Then I walked inside like nothing had happened. "Hey, honey," Daphne called from the kitchen. "How was your evening with Jake?" "Good. We practiced soccer." I hung my keys on the hook by the door, the same routine I'd followed for years. "How was dinner with Sarah?" "Oh, you know how she is. Still bitter about the divorce, still convinced all men are scum." Daphne appeared in the doorway, having changed into pajamas and washed off her makeup. She looked tired but relaxed, like someone who'd just had a pleasant evening out. The performance was flawless. "She's probably not wrong about the scum part," I said. Daphne laughed. "Don't be so hard on your gender. There are a few good ones left." "If you say so." We went through the bedtime routine like actors hitting their marks. Daphne brushed her teeth while I checked the locks on the doors. I set the coffee maker while she turned down the bed. We moved around each other with practiced efficiency, a married couple preparing for another night of shared sleep and separate dreams. "I love you," she said as we settled into bed, her voice soft in the darkness. "Love you too," I replied automatically, but the words felt like ash in my mouth. I lay awake for hours after Daphne fell asleep, listening to her breathing and staring at the ceiling. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I was going to destroy her. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove across town to Holt's Honest Autos. The lot was exactly what I'd expected. Rows of overpriced cars with questionable histories, banners promising easy financing and no credit check, and that ridiculous inflatable gorilla dancing in the wind like a polyester prophet of poor financial decisions. Trevor was in the office, visible through the plate glass window, talking on the phone and gesturing with his free hand. He looked exactly like I remembered from the few times we'd met at social events. Tall, tan, perfectly groomed hair that probably cost more to maintain than my monthly grocery budget. The kind of guy who wore cologne to the gym and called everyone buddy or chief. I parked across the street and watched him work. He sold a red Camaro to a young couple who clearly couldn't afford it, shaking hands and slapping backs like he was doing them a favor instead of setting them up for financial ruin. Real prince among men. After the couple left, I walked onto the lot. "Well, well," Trevor said, stepping out of the office with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Colton Reyes, what brings you to my little corner of automotive paradise?" "Just looking around," I said. "Thought it was time for a new truck." "Smart man. That old Ford of yours has seen better days." He gestured toward my 15-year-old F-150 like it was a diseased animal. "What kind of budget are we working with?" We spent 20 minutes walking around the lot while Trevor pitched various vehicles with the enthusiasm of a carnival barker. He was good at his job, I had to admit. Smooth, confident, persuasive. The kind of guy who could sell ice to Eskimos or convince a married woman to throw away her family for a trip down memory lane. "You know," Trevor said as we examined a black Silverado, "Daphne mentioned you might be looking for something new." The casual way he dropped her name into the conversation was like a slap across the face. No guilt, no awkwardness, no recognition that he was talking to the husband of the woman he was pursuing. "Did she?" I kept my voice neutral. "When was this?" "Oh, you know how it is in a small town. Run into old friends at the grocery store, catch up on life." Trevor ran his hand along the truck's hood like he was petting a horse. "She looks great, by the way. You're a lucky man." "I am indeed. We should all get together sometime. Double date like old times. I'm sure Elena would love to meet you properly." Elena, his wife, the woman who had no idea her husband was currently trying to steal mine. "That sounds great," I said. "I'll mention it to Daphne." We shook hands, and I left without buying anything. But I'd gotten what I came for: information, confirmation, and a good long look at my enemy. Trevor Holt was everything I wasn't. Charming where I was direct, flashy where I was practical, smooth where I was rough around the edges. He represented everything Daphne thought she was missing in her life with me. But he had one fatal flaw. He was a cheating bastard, just like my wife. And cheating bastards always had something to hide. That afternoon, I made a phone call that would change the entire game. "Elena Holt, this is Colton Reyes. I think we need to talk." Elena Holt had a voice like broken glass, sharp, brittle, with edges that could cut if you weren't careful. When I called her that afternoon, she sounded suspicious and tired, like someone who'd been expecting bad news for a long time. "Colton Reyes," she repeated slowly. "Daphne's husband." "That's right. I was wondering if we could meet somewhere private. I have something to show you that I think you should see." A long pause. In the background, I could hear a television playing and what sounded like children arguing. "This is about Trevor, isn't it?" she said finally. "Yes, ma'am, it is." "Starbucks on 5th Street, 1 hour." The line went silent. I'd never actually met Elena, though I'd heard about her over the years. She was Trevor's second wife, a nurse at Mercy General who'd married him 5 years ago in what Daphne had described as a beautiful ceremony that I'd been conveniently unable to attend due to a work emergency. Looking back, I wondered if Daphne had been invited as Trevor's guest rather than as my wife's old friend. The Starbucks was busy with the afternoon rush. Office workers grabbing caffeine fixes, students hunched over laptops, Mothers with strollers trying to maintain conversations over crying babies. I found a corner table and ordered a black coffee, then waited. Elena arrived exactly on time. She was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'4" with shoulder-length blonde hair, and the kind of pale skin that suggested too many double shifts under fluorescent lights. She wore scrubs and sneakers, and her eyes had the hollow look of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "You must be Colton," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Thanks for coming. I know this is awkward." Awkward is one word for it. She ordered a large coffee with extra shots, then turned those hollow eyes on me. "So what did my husband do this time?" This time. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. "You know," I said, "I suspect there's a difference." Elena wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was trying to warm something that had been cold for a long time. "Trevor thinks he's clever, but he's about as subtle as a brick through a window. Late nights, mysterious phone calls, sudden interest in his appearance. Either he's having a midlife crisis or he's screwing around again." Again. "I have proof," I said. I showed her the phone records, the location data, the timeline of messages and calls. Elena studied the information with the clinical detachment of someone examining medical charts, asking questions about dates and times, cross-referencing my evidence with her own observations. 3 months, she said finally. That's when he started working late, going to the gym more often, buying new clothes. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I actually thought he was trying to improve himself for me. How's that for stupid? You're not stupid. You're married. There's a difference. Is there? Elena looked up from the phone records. How long have you known? Since yesterday morning. And you're already here, building a case, gathering evidence. Most men would have just punched him in the face. I thought about it, but punching him won't fix anything. It'll just make me feel better for about 5 minutes, and then I'll be the bad guy in the story. Elena nodded slowly. So what do you want from me? That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Just someone else who understood what it felt like to have your life quietly dismantled by people who were supposed to love you. I want them to face consequences, I said. Real consequences. I want everyone to know what they did, and I want it to cost them something that matters. Their reputations. Their jobs, their comfortable little fantasy where they're the heroes of their own love story. I leaned forward. I want to burn it all down. Elena was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee like it might contain answers. When she looked up, her hollow eyes had a new light in them. Not warmth, exactly, but something harder and more useful. What did you have in mind? We talked for 2 hours, building a plan that was part strategy and part therapy. Elena, it turned out, had been collecting her own evidence for weeks. Credit card statements showing charges at restaurants she'd never been to, unexplained absences, the gradual erosion of intimacy that marked a marriage in decline. The thing is, she said, Trevor's convinced he's smarter than everyone else. He thinks I'm just some naive little wife who doesn't pay attention. But I've been paying attention to everything. Such as? His business, for starters. Holt's Honest Autos isn't as honest as the name suggests. He's been selling cars with rolled-back odometers, hiding accident damage, forging inspection certificates. Nothing that would land him in federal prison, but enough to get his dealer license revoked if the state found out. You have proof? I have copies of everything. Trevor's not very good with computers, so he asked me to help him organize his files last year. I kept backups of all the interesting documents. Elena Holt was turning out to be more dangerous than her husband had ever imagined. There's more, she continued. Trevor's been skimming money from the business, hiding it in a separate account. He thinks he's being clever, setting up his exit strategy for when he leaves me for your wife. The casual way she said it, when he leaves me for your wife, was like a punch to the gut. She'd already accepted that her marriage was over, had moved past denial and anger straight into cold, calculating planning. How much money? About $30,000 over the past year. Money that should have gone to taxes, to his business partner, to our joint accounts. Money he's been stealing from his own family to fund his midlife crisis. We finished our coffee and moved to my truck, where Elena showed me copies of documents that painted a picture of systematic fraud and financial manipulation. Trevor Holt wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a criminal who happened to be cheating on his wife. The question is, Elena said, what do we do with all this information? We use it, I said, but carefully. And we make sure that when everything comes out, Daphne goes down with him. You really love her, don't you? The question caught me off guard. What? Your wife. You really love her. That's why this hurts so much. I thought about it, watching traffic flow past on 5th Street. Did I love Daphne? Or did I just love the idea of her, the life we'd built together, the version of myself that existed in our marriage? I love who she used to be, I said finally. I love who I thought she was, but that person might never have existed in the first place. Elena nodded. Trevor used to bring me flowers every Friday when we were dating. Roses, always roses, with little notes about how much he loved me. After we got married, the flowers stopped. When I asked him about it, he said he didn't see the point anymore. He'd already won me. Sounds like Trevor. The thing is, I found out later that he'd done the exact same thing with his first wife. Same flowers, same notes, probably the same words. It wasn't romantic. It was just a sales technique. We sat in silence for a moment, two people who'd discovered that their marriages were built on lies and performance art. So what's the plan? Elena asked. First, we document everything. Every meeting, every phone call, every lie they tell us. We build a case that's so airtight they can't deny it or spin it or make us look like the crazy ones. And then? Then we pick the perfect moment and we destroy them both, publicly, completely, and permanently. Elena smiled for the first time since we'd met, and it transformed her entire face. She looked younger, more alive, like someone who'd just remembered she had power. I like you, Colton Reyes, she said. This is going to be fun. As she walked back to her car, I realized that I'd just made the most dangerous alliance of my life. Elena Holt was smart, motivated, and had access to information that could ruin her husband's life. She was also a woman who'd been betrayed and humiliated, which made her capable of almost anything, which was exactly what I needed. My phone buzzed with a text from Daphne. Working late again tonight, don't wait up. I smiled and typed back, no problem, love you. Let the games begin. 2 weeks later, I was a different man. Not better, not worse, just different. Sharper, more focused. Like I'd been walking around half asleep for years and had suddenly snapped awake. Elena and I had been meeting every few days, comparing notes and building our case like prosecutors preparing for trial. She was methodical, organized, and absolutely ruthless when it came to documenting her husband's failures. I was starting to understand why Trevor was so eager to trade her in for a newer model. Elena Holt was dangerous in ways he'd never bothered to notice. Meanwhile, Daphne was getting sloppy. The working late excuses were becoming more frequent. The mysterious phone calls were happening in our own house, hushed conversations behind closed doors that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. She'd started buying new clothes, subtle things that transformed her from suburban mom into something more polished and sophisticated. She was preparing to become Trevor's woman instead of mine. The breaking point came on a Thursday night when she announced she was going to a pharmaceutical conference in Columbus over the weekend. It's mandatory, she said, not quite meeting my eyes as she packed her overnight bag. All the office managers have to attend. Team building, new procedures, you know how it is. I knew exactly how it was. I'd already called her office and confirmed that there was no conference, mandatory or otherwise. Dr. Peterson's receptionist had been very helpful, mentioning that Daphne had requested Friday off for personal reasons. "Sounds important," I said. "Which hotel are you staying at?" "The Marriott downtown, but I'll probably be in meetings most of the time." Another lie. The Columbus Marriott was booked solid that weekend for an actual pharmaceutical conference, one that Daphne's company wasn't attending. I helped her carry her bag to the car, kissed her goodbye like a loving husband, and waved as she drove away to spend the weekend with Trevor Holt in whatever romantic getaway they'd planned. Then I called Elena. "It's time," I said. "You sure about this?" "I'm sure, are you?" A pause. "Trevor told me he's going to a car auction in Cincinnati this weekend. He'll be back Sunday night." "Cincinnati's only 2 hours from Columbus." "Isn't that convenient?" We met at the Crowbar an hour later. The place was nearly empty on a Thursday night, just a few regulars nursing beers and watching the Indians lose to Detroit on the big screen. Elena looked different out of her scrubs, younger, more attractive, wearing jeans and a black sweater that showed off a figure that Trevor was apparently willing to throw away for a trip down memory lane. "Last chance to back out," I said as we settled into a corner booth. "Are you backing out?" "Hell no." "Then neither am I." Elena pulled a manila envelope from her purse. "I've got everything we discussed. Financial records, business documents, photographs, a timeline of every lie he's told me in the past 3 months. And I've got the phone records, location data, and a few surprises of my own." The surprises were the result of 2 weeks of careful investigation. I'd followed Daphne to 3 more meetings with Trevor, documenting their growing boldness. I'd also done some research into Trevor's business practices, confirming Elena's suspicions about the odometer fraud and discovering a few additional violations that would make very interesting reading for the Ohio Department of Commerce. But the real surprise was something Elena didn't know about yet. "There's one more thing," I said. "I hired a private investigator." Elena's eyebrows shot up. "You did what?" "A guy named Murphy who used to be a cop. He's been following them for the past week, taking pictures, documenting their activities." I slid a second envelope across the table. "Professional quality surveillance photos of your husband and my wife at 3 different locations, including a very nice shot of them checking into the Riverside Motel on Tuesday afternoon." Elena opened the envelope and spread the photos across the table like playing cards. Her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, hurt, anger, and finally a cold satisfaction that was almost frightening to watch. "These are good," she said, studying a particularly damning shot of Trevor and Daphne kissing in the parking lot of the motel. "Very good. Murphy's expensive, but he's worth it. These photos will hold up in divorce court, and they're clear enough that anyone who sees them will know exactly what's going on." "So what's the plan?" I'd been thinking about this for days, weighing different options and scenarios. The goal wasn't just to expose the affair, it was to destroy both of them completely, to make sure they faced real consequences for what they'd done. "We're going to ruin them," I said. "Professionally, socially, financially. We're going to make sure that everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of people they are." "How?" "Monday morning, you're going to file for divorce and request an emergency hearing based on adultery and financial misconduct. You'll present the judge with evidence of Trevor's affair and his business fraud, and you'll ask for temporary custody of the kids and control of all marital assets." Elena nodded slowly. "That'll freeze his accounts and put him on the defensive." "Exactly. While you're doing that, I'll be visiting the Ohio Department of Commerce with copies of Trevor's fraudulent business records. His dealer license will be suspended pending investigation, which means he won't be able to sell cars or access his business accounts." "And Daphne?" This was the part I'd been looking forward to. "Daphne's going to have a very bad day at work. It seems that someone's going to anonymously tip off her boss about her unprofessional conduct, complete with photos of her afternoon activities at the Riverside Motel. They'll fire her, They'll have to. Midwest Pharmaceutical has a strict morality clause in their employment contracts. Adultery is grounds for immediate termination, especially when it involves lying to supervisors about work schedules. Elena was smiling now, and it wasn't a nice smile. What about the social aspect? Leave that to me. I've got a plan that'll make sure everyone in town knows exactly what happened. We spent another hour going over details, timing, and contingencies. Elena was surprisingly good at this kind of strategic thinking. I was starting to understand that her quiet, submissive wife act had been just that, an act. The real Elena Holt was sharp, calculating, and absolutely merciless when it came to protecting her interests. "There's one thing I need to know," she said as we prepared to leave. "After this is over, after we've destroyed them both, what happens to us?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, are we going to stay in touch? Are we friends now, or just temporary allies?" It was a good question. Elena and I had been thrown together by circumstances, united by betrayal and a shared desire for revenge. But what would we be to each other when the dust settled? "I don't know," I said honestly. "I guess we'll find out." Fair enough. She gathered up the photos and documents, sliding them back into her purse. "For what it's worth, I'm glad we're doing this together. I don't think I could have handled it alone." "You're stronger than you think." "So are you. Trevor and Daphne have no idea what's coming." As I watched Elena walk to her car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: genuine optimism. Not happiness, exactly, but a sense of purpose and control that had been missing from my life since I'd discovered Daphne's betrayal. Tomorrow was Friday. Daphne and Trevor would spend the weekend together, probably making plans for their future, convinced that they were smarter than their spouses and that their secret was safe. Monday morning, they'd learn how wrong they were. My phone buzzed with a text from Daphne. "Hotel's nice. Missing you and Jake." I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "Missing you too. Have fun at your conference." The last lie I'd ever tell my wife. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of persistent drizzle that made everything look washed out and depressing. Perfect weather for what I had planned. I dropped Jake off at school with a kiss and a promise to pick him up at the usual time, then drove straight to the Ohio Department of Commerce building downtown. Elena would be filing her divorce papers at the courthouse across the street at exactly the same time, and by noon, Trevor Holt's world would be falling apart in multiple directions simultaneously. The Department of Commerce took fraud very seriously, especially when it involved automobile dealers. I presented my evidence to a stern-faced investigator named Patricia Wells, who studied Trevor's forged inspection certificates and odometer discrepancies with the focused attention of a surgeon examining a tumor. "This is extensive," she said, spreading the documents across her desk. "How did you come by this information?" "Anonymous tip," I said. "Someone who was concerned about consumer protection." Wells nodded. She'd probably heard that story 100 times, but she didn't seem to care about my motives as long as the evidence was solid. "We'll need to verify these documents, but if they're authentic, Mr. Holt's dealer license will be suspended immediately. He won't be able to sell vehicles or access his business accounts until the investigation is complete." "How long does that usually take?" 6 to 8 months, assuming he cooperates fully. If he doesn't," she shrugged, "could be longer." I left the building feeling lighter than I had in weeks. By the time Trevor got back from his romantic weekend with my wife, his business would be going nowhere and his bank accounts would be frozen. Elena's divorce filing would take care of his personal finances, leaving him with nothing but legal bills and a very uncertain future. My next stop was Midwest Pharmaceutical. Dr. Peterson was exactly what you'd expect from a small-town medical practice owner. Late 50s, gray hair, the kind of man who still wore ties to work and believed in old-fashioned concepts like professional conduct and personal responsibility. "Mr. Reyes," he said, shaking my hand in his office, "what can I do for you?" I'm here about Daphne, I said. My wife. I think there are some things about her recent behavior that you should know. Peterson's face went through several expressions as I laid out the evidence. The fake conference story, the afternoon meetings at motels, the systematic deception that had been going on for months. I showed him Murphy's photographs, the phone records, the timeline of lies that Daphne had told to cover her tracks. I'm very sorry, he said when I finished. This must be devastating for you. It is. But I thought you should know that she's been using work as an excuse for her personal activities. I'm not sure what your company policy is regarding this kind of behavior. Peterson's jaw tightened. Our employee handbook is very clear about maintaining professional standards and personal integrity. We can't have staff members lying about their schedules or using company time for personal matters. I understand. I'll need to speak with Daphne when she returns from her conference. He practically spat the word. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I left, knowing that Daphne's career was over. Even if Peterson didn't fire her immediately, her reputation at the company was destroyed. She'd never be trusted with responsibility again, never be considered for promotions, never be anything more than a cautionary tale about the consequences of poor judgment. But I wasn't finished yet. My final stop was the Riverside Elementary School, where Jake was a fourth grader and where Daphne had been an active volunteer for years. She'd helped with fundraisers, chaperoned field trips, served on the PTA board. She was known and respected in the school community, seen as a dedicated mother and upstanding citizen. That was about to change. Principal Martinez was a friend of sorts. We'd worked together on several school events, and our kids had been in classes together since kindergarten. She greeted me warmly when I arrived at her office. Colton, what brings you by? Is Jake feeling okay? Jake's fine. Actually, I'm here about something else, something personal that might affect the school community. I gave her a condensed version of the story, focusing on the impact on Jake and the other families who'd trusted Daphne with their children during school events. I didn't show her the motel photographs. That would have been inappropriate. But I made it clear that Daphne's behavior had been deceptive and ongoing. Oh my, Martinez said when I finished. This is very concerning. We rely heavily on parent volunteers, and trust is essential when we're dealing with other people's children. I just thought you should know. Jake and I will be dealing with some difficult times ahead, and I wanted to make sure the school was prepared. Of course. And Colton? I'm very sorry this is happening to your family. By the time I left the school, word would spread through the parent network like wildfire. Daphne's reputation in the community would be destroyed within hours, her name becoming synonymous with deception and betrayal. I spent the rest of the day at work, going through the motions of coordinating shipments and managing logistics, while my phone buzzed with updates from Elena. Trevor's business accounts had been frozen. The divorce papers had been served at his office by a sheriff's deputy. His dealer license was officially suspended pending investigation. At 3 o'clock, Elena texted, "It's done." Trevor called me screaming about lawyers and conspiracies. He has no idea how bad it's about to get. At 4:30, my phone rang. Daphne's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, I considered not answering. But I wanted to hear her voice when her world started falling apart. Hello? Colton? She sounded confused, maybe a little scared. I just got a call from Dr. Peterson. He wants to see me first thing tomorrow morning. He wouldn't tell me what it was about, but he sounded angry. That's strange. Maybe it's about the Henderson account? No, he said it was personal. Something about my conduct and company policy. Her voice was getting higher, more panicked. What could that mean? I'm sure it's nothing serious. Maybe just a misunderstanding. But what if it's not? What if someone said something about me? What if... Daphne. I kept my voice calm, soothing. Whatever it is, we'll deal with it together. That's what married couples do. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. You're right, she said, but she didn't sound convinced. I'm probably overreacting. It's just been a stressful weekend. How was the conference? A pause. Fine. Boring, mostly. I'll tell you about it when I get home. Drive safely. I love you. I love you too. But we both knew those words didn't mean anything anymore. I picked up Jake from school and took him for ice cream, letting him chatter about his day while I watched other families enjoying normal moments that I'd never have again. A father and daughter sharing a sundae. A mother helping her son with homework. Simple, uncomplicated relationships built on trust and honesty. Things I'd taken for granted until they were gone. Dad? Jake was looking at me with concern. You're doing the angry thing again. Sorry, buddy. Just thinking. About Mom? The question caught me off guard. What about Mom? She's been different lately, distracted, like her mind is somewhere else. Jake poked at his ice cream with his spoon. Are you guys getting divorced? The directness of the question hit me like a physical blow. Kids were supposed to be oblivious to adult problems, protected by innocence and parental discretion. But Jake had been watching, listening, picking up on the subtle changes in our family dynamic. Why would you ask that? Because Tommy's parents got divorced last year, and his mom acted the same way before it happened. Lots of phone calls, working late, being nice but not really there. I looked at my 10-year-old son, this smart, perceptive kid who'd inherited the best parts of both his parents, and realized that he deserved honesty. I don't know what's going to happen, I said, but whatever does happen, you need to know that it's not your fault, and that both your mom and I love you very much. Jake nodded solemnly. Okay, but if you do get divorced, can I still live with you sometimes? Always, I said. No matter what happens, you'll always have a home with me. We finished our ice cream in comfortable silence, and I realized that this might be one of the last normal moments Jake and I would share for a while. Tomorrow, when the full scope of Daphne's betrayal became public, our family would be the subject of gossip and speculation. Jake would have to deal with whispers at school, awkward questions from friends, the social fallout of having parents who couldn't keep their marriage together. But he'd survive it. Kids were resilient, and Jake was stronger than most. Unlike his mother, who was about to learn that actions had consequences. We drove home to wait for Daphne's return, and for the conversation that would end our marriage once and for all. Daphne came home at 8:30, looking tired and nervous. She'd stopped somewhere to buy flowers, cheap grocery store roses that were probably meant as a peace offering or a distraction from whatever guilt was eating at her. These are for you, she said, handing me the bouquet with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Just because. Thank you. They're beautiful. I put the flowers in a vase while Daphne went upstairs to check on Jake, who was supposedly doing homework but was probably playing games on his tablet. The domestic routine felt surreal, like we were actors in a play about a normal marriage, going through the motions while the theater burned down around us. When she came back downstairs, I was waiting in the living room with 2 glasses of wine and a manila envelope on the coffee table. Jake's almost finished with his math, she said, settling onto the couch beside me. He missed you this weekend. I missed him too. I handed her a glass of wine. How was your conference? Oh, you know, boring presentations, terrible coffee, networking events that went too late. She took a sip of wine and glanced at the envelope. What's that? Something we need to discuss. The change in my tone made her freeze with the wine glass halfway to her lips. For the first time since she'd walked in the door, she really looked at me. Not the distracted, guilty glance of someone with secrets to hide, but the focused attention of someone who sensed danger. Colton, what's wrong? I opened the envelope and spread Murphy's surveillance photographs across the coffee table like a dealer laying out cards. Daphne and Trevor at the park. Daphne and Trevor at the motel. Daphne and Trevor kissing in a parking lot while their spouses waited at home. The wine glass slipped from Daphne's fingers, red liquid spreading across the white carpet. Oh God, she whispered. 3 months, I said, keeping my voice calm and conversational. 3 months of lies, sneaking around, using me as your cover story while you rekindled your romance with Trevor Holt. Daphne's face went through a series of expressions: shock, fear, calculation, and finally a kind of desperate defiance. It's not what it looks like, she said. Really? Because it looks like my wife is having an affair with her ex-boyfriend. It looks like she's been lying to me every day for months, using our son as an excuse to meet her lover, planning some kind of future that doesn't include her husband. Colton, please. There was no pharmaceutical conference this weekend, was there? You spent the weekend with Trevor while I stayed home with our son, probably making plans for how you were going to leave me. Daphne's shoulders sagged, and for a moment she looked like the woman I'd married, vulnerable, human, capable of remorse. But then her spine straightened and her jaw set, and I saw the stranger she'd become. You had me followed, she said. You hired someone to spy on me. I hired someone to document the truth, something you seem to have forgotten how to do. You had no right. I had no right. The words came out louder than I'd intended, and I had to force myself to lower my voice. Jake was upstairs, and he didn't need to hear this conversation. I had no right to investigate my own wife's behavior when she was lying to me every single day? It's not that simple. Then explain it to me. Make me understand how sleeping with your ex-boyfriend while married to me is complicated. Daphne flinched at the profanity, but she didn't back down. You don't understand what it's been like, living in this house, feeling invisible. When was the last time you really looked at me, Colton? When was the last time you made me feel like a woman instead of just a wife and mother? So this is my fault. No, it's not your fault, but it's not entirely my fault either. We've been drifting apart for years, going through the motions, pretending everything was fine when we both knew it wasn't. And your solution was to start screwing Trevor Holt. My solution was to remember what it felt like to be desired, to be seen, to matter to someone. Tears were streaming down her face now, but her voice remained steady. Trevor makes me feel alive again. Trevor's married. Trevor's getting divorced. The casual way she said it hit me like a slap. Is he? That's interesting because I spoke to his wife today and she seemed to think their marriage was just fine. Daphne's eyes widened. You spoke to Elena? I spoke to Elena. I also spoke to Dr. Peterson, Principal Martinez, and a very nice investigator at the Department of Commerce. It's been a busy day. The color drained from Daphne's face as the implications sank in. What did you do? I told them the truth. Something you might want to try sometime. You destroyed me. Her voice was barely a whisper. You destroyed my job, my reputation, everything I've worked for. No, Daphne, you destroyed yourself. I just made sure there were consequences. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back, her hands shaking. This is insane. You can't just ruin someone's life because you're angry. I didn't ruin your life. You did that yourself when you decided to throw away our marriage for a trip down memory lane with a used car salesman. Don't you dare. What? Don't I dare what? Tell the truth about your boyfriend? Point out that you're willing to destroy our family for a man who sells overpriced cars to people who can't afford them? Trevor's not like that. Trevor's exactly like that. He's a fraud, Daphne. His business is built on lies, just like your relationship with him. Did you know he's been rolling back odometers, forging inspection certificates, stealing money from his own company? Daphne stopped pacing. That's not true. It's all true. Elena has the documentation. That's why his dealer license was suspended today and why his business accounts are frozen. Your boyfriend is a criminal and you're his accomplice. You helped him lie to his wife. You helped him plan his escape strategy. You were going to help him steal money from his family to start a new life with you. I stood up and moved closer to her. Did you really think Elena was too stupid to notice? Did you think I was too stupid to figure it out? Daphne collapsed back onto the couch, her head in her hands. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? You and Trevor were going to ride off into the sunset while Elena and I picked up the pieces? You were going to take Jake away from me and play house with a man who's probably already looking for his next mark? Stop it. You want to know the really sad part? I would have fought for our marriage if you'd just been honest with me. If you'd come to me and said you were unhappy, that you needed something different, I would have tried to fix it. But you didn't give me that chance. You decided I wasn't worth the effort. Colton, I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. I'm asking for primary custody of Jake, and I'm going to get it. Your affair, your lies, your complete disregard for our family, it's all documented now. No judge is going to give custody to a woman who abandoned her family for a criminal. You can't take Jake away from me. I'm not taking him away from you. You're losing him because of the choices you made. The conversation was interrupted by footsteps on the stairs. Jake appeared in the doorway, wearing pajamas and a confused expression. "Why are you guys yelling?" he asked. Daphne and I looked at each other, both of us realizing that our son had heard at least part of our argument. The anger drained out of the room, replaced by a shared sense of guilt and responsibility. "We're just having a disagreement," I said. "Nothing for you to worry about." But Jake was 10 years old, not stupid. He looked at the photographs scattered across the coffee table, at his mother's tear-stained face, at the tension crackling between his parents. "Are you getting divorced?" he asked. Daphne started to speak, probably to offer some comforting lie, but I cut her off. "Yes," I said. "We are." Jake nodded solemnly like he'd been expecting this answer. "Okay, can I still see both of you?" "Of course," Daphne said, her voice breaking. "Always." "And it's not my fault?" "No, buddy," I said. "It's definitely not your fault. Sometimes adults make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes mean they can't live together anymore. But we both love you very much, and that will never change." Jake considered this for a moment, then walked over and hugged both of us, a group hug that felt like a goodbye to the family we'd been and would never be again. "I'm going to finish my homework," he said, and disappeared back upstairs. Daphne and I sat in silence for a long time, the weight of what we'd just done settling over us like a shroud. Our marriage was over, our family was broken, and our son was going to grow up in a world divided between his parents. "I never meant for this to happen," Daphne said finally. "I know. I do love you. I always have. I know that too, but love isn't enough anymore." She gathered up the photographs, handling them like they were evidence of a crime, which, in a way, they were. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you call Trevor and find out how much of his life has fallen apart today. Then you figure out if he's still interested in a relationship with a woman who's unemployed, unemployable, and comes with a 10-year-old son. And if he's not, then you figure out how to rebuild your life from scratch, just like I'm going to do." Daphne stood up, holding the photographs against her chest like a shield. "I'm sorry, Colton. For all of it. So am I." She walked upstairs to pack a bag, and I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage and the promise of an uncertain future. But for the first time in months, I felt like myself again,